Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and today we're going to be talking about Starfield. This title was sent to me by Bethesda so that I could give it a look and tell you guys my opinions on it. Now, before we get started with this video, I feel it is important for me to give you a little bit of a background when it comes to me and Bethesda games, because I am not what most people would consider a traditional huge fan of Bethesda titles. I did jump into Skyrim back in the day when the hype was at its peak, and, you know, the biggest thing about that game to me is always that I just don't like the melee combat in Skyrim. I don't think it's particularly good. I understand that a lot of people do like it, and, you know, that's your prerogative, but I didn't like it, and therefore it was very hard for me to really get properly immersed in the game because, you know, I just don't like the combat. It is what it is. Later down the line, and I'm talking about a couple of years after Fallout 4 came out, I eventually played the entirety of Fallout 4 on stream, and that was actually a fun experience. But the thing about Fallout is that I'm not a huge fan of the setting of Fallout. The post-apocalyptic setting is just something that is not particularly appealing to me. Again, I can see why a lot of people enjoy it. I can see the gameplay features that a lot of people really like when it comes to these games. But, you know, it just felt like there was something missing in all of these titles. And when it comes to Starfield, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that it is my favorite Bethesda game. Now, I want you to understand, when I say that, I'm not saying that Starfield is the best Bethesda game. I'm saying it is the best Bethesda game for me. And that is mostly, I feel, because of the setting. Because the setting of this game is space. It is in the future. You get to have your own spaceship. You get to customize your spaceship, which is actually really cool. And we'll talk more about that in this video. You get to, you know, do space combat. You get to do all of these crazy things, and you still get to have that Bethesda adventure with dialogue choices and interaction with different NPCs and all of that stuff, and you get to be basically immersed in this universe. And that was definitely something that grabbed me from the beginning that I started playing the game, because it's been interesting. I've been following the online discourse of Starfield, and we're going to be addressing a lot of the things that people talk about when it comes to this game. And one of the things that I notice is that a lot of people say, oh, the game begins really slow. And it's like, well, yeah, I guess it's a little bit slow until you get your spaceship. But after you get your spaceship, I don't think it's that slow at all. But that's me personally. I guess, you know, people are going to be playing this game in a myriad of different ways because there's just so much freedom once you finally get your ship. And, you know, at this point, some of you guys might be wondering, but okay, but what does the game actually play like, Rurikhan? Because maybe you want to know what the feel is of playing this game. Hopefully you've played Fallout in the past, because one of the easiest ways of saying it is this game is like Fallout in space with a little bit of space combat, a little bit of exploration, and a little bit of procedural generation as well to keep things fresh. Now, is that the best possible procedural generation, which we're going to be talking quite a bit about because I know that a lot of people are upset about the procedural generation? No, but to me, it felt like it was enough for what I wanted out of the game. So some of the things that I've been doing in this game before, because at this point I'm like 45 hours in, give or take, some of the things that I've been doing to give you guys an idea, I've done a lot of the combat naturally because that's kind of like expected very early on. I've done some of the random space events, which have actually been interesting, and that's kind of the stuff that I tend to focus on the most, is heading out into space and trying to do stuff in space, because that's the part that I like. I've done a bit of space combat. I've created my own ship, which was actually really interesting, and that's one of the features that I'm the most excited about when it comes to Starfield, is basically designing my own version of the Millennium Falcon, which is going to be interesting once I finally unlock more parts and get enough credits to actually be able to create the damn thing, because I believe my last sketch of Millennium Falcon, which I spent like 2 hours working on in the game, like not even playing the game, just 2 hours fiddling around in the ship builder, knowing that I didn't even have the credits for it. I think my last sketch was like 150,000 credits, something like that. But I want to make an even better one. But, you know, that is something that I'm really into. Creating my own spaceships, you know, fiddling around with the different modules, guns, and all of this stuff, and then taking them out into space and flying around and just having a good time. I also made an outpost. Outpost is not something that I'm interested in at all. I basically made an outpost because there was a quest in the game that says, I want you to get me 5,000 iron. And I was like, huh? You better believe I'm not going to be mining that by hand. You're crazy. So I made an outpost just to see if I could finish that quest. And by now, if I really wanted to dedicate my time to it, I could probably finish that quest fairly easily. But, you know, I haven't really invested all the time, but I did do an outpost, a basic outpost, to get an idea of how that works. And the other thing that I've done is I've engaged in tons of dialogue because of some of the quests that I've picked when I was playing Starfield. So all of that has actually been very fun, and my experience has been somewhat contrasted to what a lot of people have been saying on the internet. So let's talk about the problems of Starfield so that then I can tell you guys about the things that I like in a little bit more detail. Number one problem for me, and I understand that, and the interesting thing about this problem is that I see a lot of people talking about the interconnectedness, which we'll discuss, the procedural generation, the loading screens, all of these problems, the limited exploration, all of this stuff. And yet, I see very few people talk about the number one problem for me. The number one problem for me in this game is inventory management is like, it makes me wonder if anybody in Bethesda actually played this game without having some kind of a mod that gives you infinite inventory. I'm not using mods, by the way, but it really does make me wonder, because like I'm playing the game and I'm seeing all of these cool things that I want to pick up. It's like, oh, these are resources. These will be used in crafting later. I'm going to pick those up and I'm going to pick this up. And I told you guys earlier, I made a custom ship. So to give you an idea, your basic ship, the very first one they give you, has about 220 whatever weight you can carry, mass, 220 mass. It can carry 220. And that always felt very limiting, but it was manageable at the beginning of the game. And so when I made my ship, I was like, no, I want to have tons and tons. So I put like 2 big, beefy cargo bays into the ship, just like, boom, slap these bad boys in there. Never going to have to worry about cargo problems again. It took me literally about 5 hours to fill them. Yep, I played the game for 5 hours. Now those things are full. And the worst part is I can't even sell all of the things that I pick up because the NPCs run out of money. So I have to constantly run around different places in town, like going to every little NPC, draining all of their measly credits that they have, and then fly to another planet and go around. And it's like, maybe it's because, again, I'm not the biggest fan of Bethesda games. Maybe there's something that I'm missing. Maybe there's something I don't understand. But the inventory management is just god awful, and it is potentially the thing that is hurting my playthrough the most. As a matter of fact, the last live stream that I did, I must have spent like 1 hour just fiddling with my inventory because I'm like, am I supposed to just delete this? I don't know. It's terrible. It's completely terrible. It is the weight limits that your character has are incredibly restrictive. The weight limits that your ship has are incredibly restrictive. And there's something that they're doing with the ships too, which I'm not sure if like the items that are on the ship, because like when you build the ship, it comes with some items on it. I don't know if those items are also taking up space in the cargo hold. It's weird. I don't know what's going on there, but there's some really weird stuff going on. And inventory management, to me, should be like priority number one. But the problem is, from the experience that I have with previous Bethesda games, as far as I'm aware, that's just the way that it is. You know? Which makes it very frustrating, and most likely it's going to cause me to just not engage with the crafting system of the game at all. But that is my biggest problem, and if they actually do something to fix it, that'd be fantastic. Because I also don't want to just have infinite inventory, because I understand that they want that to be a mechanic, but it doesn't have to be such a restrictive mechanic, I feel like. But let me know in the comment section if you disagree. Now, on to some of the complaints that people talked about, and that I kind of agree can be considered a problem. The interconnectedness of the game. And that is to say, how connected are things? So a lot of the things when it comes to Starfield, they're separated by loading screens, which is why a lot of people are complaining, oh man, there's so many friggin' loading screens. Now, the good thing for me is that I have an NVMe drive, so those loads are fairly fast. It doesn't really bother me all that much. But I do understand why for some people it takes them out of the experience, because you're going like, oh, I want to go into this building, loading screen. Oh, I want to go into this place in space, loading screen. You're kind of missing a little bit of immersion, I feel like, due to the fact that one of the things that people have said is, oh, I want to be able to fly my ship off the planet, kind of like No Man's Sky. I understand. It's very appealing. I love doing that too. As a matter of fact, when it comes to the gold standard of space simulators, it's not really space simulators, because, you know, space simulators should be even more complex. But let's say the gold standard for me when it comes to space sims is Elite Dangerous. That is the one that I've played the most, and that is the one that I enjoy the most. And when it comes to that game, just learning how to dock your ship in a space station is like an experience that requires quite a bit of skill your first time around. Then it kind of becomes automatic, but like the first time that a player actually goes into a space station and docks his ship, is like, oh my god, I did it, Jesus Christ. And, you know, I like the manual controls of ships. So I would have preferred myself to be able to like, oh, just take off, go, and whatever. Now, is it something that bothers me too much to the point where I feel like, game is unplayable? No. Would it be better if it had those things be more interconnected? Definitely. And then the other problem that comes with that is like the little bubbles that you have. So whenever you go into space, you're essentially in a bubble. And whenever you want to go to a different part of space, you're going to go through a loading screen and a little animation of your ship flying to its destination. And here's another complaint that people have. It's like, oh, this stuff is not really interconnected. Again, it's all about the interconnectedness of the space, right? And again, to me, it's not something that bothers me too much because I've spent so much time already doing those types of things in Elite Dangerous where I'm like, okay, I want to go from this planet, that planet, enter super cruise mode, fly, go in there, and then, you know, settle down. And I like doing it. It's not a big, it's not a problem for me. But I also understand there's going to be a lot of people that are not going to want to do that. They don't want to do the whole space thing of flying around to different planets, and they just want to go to a place and fast travel and boom, go. And you guys might be like, oh, Rurikhan, you're out of your mind. I would have much preferred to have the interconnectedness. To me, I think what should have happened was a medium point where you have both. Where if you want to fly there, you can. But if you want to just do the loading screen thing and fast travel there, you can as well. That would have been a happy medium, but naturally the creation engine is not going to support that. And to be honest, that is not something that I expected because even though I'm not the biggest Bethesda fan in the world, I am familiar with the way that their engine works, and I am familiar with the limitations of said engine, and I would have never expected the game to do that. And I understand that there's been some marketing material that people have interpreted in a way where it's like, you can go to space and do everything, go anywhere, do anything. And it's like, maybe it's because I've been in the industry for so long, I just don't really pay attention to marketing material that much. It's like, you're not really going to convince me that your game is going to blow my mind off of just somebody going up on a stage and saying something, okay? Especially when it comes, like, I'm sorry, but especially when it comes to Todd Howard. It's just the way that it is. But, you know, when it comes to that stuff, to me, it's not something that prevents my enjoyment, but I understand where people are coming from. But at the same time, I also have to say, there was a time where I was streaming this game called New World. It's an MMORPG. And I was streaming New World in my channel, and New World has this map that is completely interconnected. And they initially, in the first couple of weeks or maybe even months, they made fast travel be something that was not necessarily easy for you to do. So if you wanted to go someplace, you had to walk there. And I distinctly remember like hundreds of people jumping into my stream just to say the words, oh, I see Rurikhan is playing the walking simulator. And so what is going on? Because like now we have this fast travel in Starfield and people are complaining. It's like, well, I don't want to fast travel. I want to slowly fly there. It's like, I don't know. Again, to me, I would have preferred a happy medium of you can fast travel if you want, or you can fly there if you want. Clearly, I knew from the beginning that their engine was not going to allow them to do that. And from the moment that I became aware that they were using some modified version, whatever version they have of the creation engine or whatever the name is of their engine, I instantly knew, okay, so curb your expectations because the game is going to be somewhat limited in scope in terms of, you know, just the number of exploration, stuff like that. So interconnectedness, loading screens, and then we also have another problem that people talked about, which is the procedural generation. Now, when it comes to procedural generation, the way that it works is you can land on planets. Whenever you land on a planet, it will basically generate a decent chunk of land that you can go and explore and do things in. One of the things that I noticed the very first times that I've used procedural generation in the game, which is I'm going to go to this planet, I'm going to land here, see what happens, because I was trying to build an outpost. I think it was when I was looking for iron. I'm not 100% sure, but I was trying to figure out how the outpost mechanic worked. So I went to a planet, landed, and what I noticed was that, there's an enemy base, at least something that looked like some type of building that would potentially have enemies on it. There's an enemy base over there, so I don't want to build my camp over here. So I lifted off and I picked another random spot in the planet and I landed there. And once it landed, I was like, there's an enemy camp there as well. And so I was like, okay, so basically wherever I land, they're going to be generating these things. I'm not saying that the enemy camp was exactly the same because I never even went there. Because that's just the thing. When it comes to procedurally generated content, it's just something that I'm not super interested in engaging in whenever it comes to a Bethesda RPG, because I know what I want out of these games, even though I'm not the biggest fan of what they've done in the past, because setting and because combat and all of that stuff. When it comes to their games, I know that what I want is I want to engage in interesting dialogues with NPCs. I want to, get some decent weapons and do all of these things, but exploring procedural generation is not the first thing that comes to mind, particularly when I think of the creation engine. And so maybe that is one of the things that I haven't engaged with nearly as much. As a matter of fact, there were situations where I basically lifted off and landed in the same exact place so that it would generate a different tile set because I was trying to find different materials and stuff, even though now I understand that the way that resources work is actually much more user friendly than what I was doing. I was doing everything wrong, basically, is what I'm saying. There's a very easy way for you to figure out, oh, if I land here, there's going to be this resource here. But whatever. I did a little bit of that, but I never really wanted to jump into a procedurally generated area and run into infinity. And the reason I guess I never really wanted to do that is because I've done that, 500 times in No Man's Sky by now. And I always know that it's like, oh, maybe I'll find something interesting, but a lot of the times you don't. That's just the way that it is. Sometimes you will find something interesting, but a lot of times you don't. It's just the way that it goes when it comes to procedural generation. So I don't necessarily expect to jump into these planets and run off into the sunset and find all these different things. I'm much more interested in jumping into space, going to different planets, going into procedural generation to get exactly what I want, like when I made my outpost for iron and all of that stuff. That to me is much more interesting than exploring a procedurally generated world in Bethesda. Now, I understand that probably for a lot of Bethesda fans, that is what they've wanted because they've gotten the satisfaction from the other things that I never got in the previous games with the dialogue choices and the setting of Fallout and all of these things that happened in those games and the epicness of Skyrim and all of that stuff. I understand that probably a lot of Bethesda fans already had all that, and the novelty for them in this game was going to be the procedural generation. And I think that that is one of the big reasons why Starfield is resonating with me so much, because I just don't care about that stuff. In a lot of ways, even though it's not my first Bethesda game, it's almost like this is my first Bethesda game, and I think that is the reason why it is as enjoyable as it is for me. Despite the fact that, really, seriously, Bethesda, for the love of God, inventory management, Jesus friggin' Christ, do something. Good Lord. But yeah, the idea that I feel that the team at Bethesda had when it came to Starfield was to marry the concepts of space exploration, space combat, and even a little bit of procedural generation tossed in there into a Bethesda RPG. And from that aspect, for what I was expecting of the game, I'm getting pretty much what I wanted. Now, I do have some things that are that actually happened in the last stream that have been a little bit of a turnoff, because initially when I started playing the game, the story was this mystery. Oh, you're finding these artifacts. I think everybody knows at the beginning of the game, you're chasing after these crazy artifacts that float and do crazy things. So I was following the artifacts, and that part of the story was cool for me because it wasn't really demanding a lot of my attention and investment, which allowed me to basically veer off the beaten path and do other completely separate things. So usually the way that it goes for me with stories is I'll analyze what I consider to be of most importance in the story for my character, and I will do that thing, and then when there's a break in the story, I'm like, okay, now I get to do whatever the hell I want. So the very first thing that I wanted to do was to go get Barrett, because Barrett's a character. He goes with you. This is not spoilers, by the way. This happens literally first 5 minutes of the game. He's a character that basically changes places with you so that you can go to this place, which is a lodge in the constellation or whatever. And the first thing that I wanted to do in the game is I wanted to go get him back, because he took me out of there and he kind of took me under his wing a little bit and whatnot. And I was like, okay, I want to go get Barrett. So I did the quest to go get Barrett, and the moment I finished with that quest, I was like, and now I'm going to do whatever the hell I want, because the next objective is go find more artifacts. I'm like, okay, there's no real sense of urgency here, so I don't really have a problem just messing around in space and figuring everything out. That's when I started working on making my own ship. I started going off the beaten path, and eventually I landed on this quest that I was curious of doing, because I wanted to roleplay something like a space scoundrel, so someone who would do everything for credits, and that kind of lines up with what I want to do in terms of making a custom ship, because you want to have a bunch of credits to make your custom ship. And so I jump into this quest line for a corporation called Ryujin. Now, I'm not going to spoil the quest line, but very early on, this is very much a corporate quest line. This is a quest line where you become a corporate espionage, corporate operative, that type of thing. So basically, you're doing all types of espionage on other corporations, and you're doing sabotage and all these things. And that quest was actually really interesting. It was fairly linear with a couple of things that you could change along the way, but it was fairly linear for the most part. But it was a very interesting quest and very different from stuff that I usually do in RPGs. So that, to me, so far has been like the highlight. I love that quest. I thought that quest was a ton of fun. The basically, and even seeing the different outcomes that quest can have are interesting. It almost makes me want to do that quest again to see what the other outcomes would be. Even though I don't know how much they funnel you at the end of the day, because a lot of times these games are very good at giving you the illusion of choice, but then funneling you down a certain road that they figured you were going to go down anyways. But that quest line was really cool, and it really showed a lot of the systems of the game, a lot of the things that I didn't even know. Like, for instance, in order to stealth in this game, you actually need to put 1 point into stealth, which I believe in other Bethesda games you can kind of like try to sneak around. You're not going to be particularly good until your sneak skill goes up, but you can kind of still try to do it. In this game, it just flat out doesn't work. Like, I even had armor that made me invisible if I was crouching, and people would still just see me. And I was like, what is this? Why can't I stealth? This is weird. But there's actually a skill that you need to put. Otherwise, there's no chance of you ever sneaking past anybody. But, you know, the point is to say that quest was really interesting, and I enjoyed it, and it was a lot of fun. And basically doing stuff outside of the main storyline was interesting and a lot of fun. However, in the last stream, we got to a point, and I can't talk too much about this because I don't want to go into spoiler territory, but for those of you who know the story already, it was when you get to your very first temple. You actually go inside the temple and you do the temple thing, and, you know, the thing that happens after that. That was when I was like, this is beginning to look really familiar to something that I've seen before, and it's not necessarily what I was expecting to see in a game like Starfield. Still, I'm going to keep going with it, but it did turn me off of the main story a little bit. We'll see how it pans out by the time I get to the end. But, you know, it's still not enough to the point where it's like, oh, I don't want to play the game or whatever. I'm having a good time. I'm having a good time, and I want to continue to have a good time. I'm actually trying to beeline the main story, because I've heard from people who got to review the game much earlier that there's the New Game Plus thing, and you probably want to get into New Game Plus before you do side content, because there's more side content available, and you lose progress on some of the stuff that you've done in normal game. So I'm trying to, like, at this point, beeline, now that I've gotten my impressions, I've gotten my feet wet, you know, I'm invested. I want to get into New Game Plus and then do all of the crazy shenanigans that I want to do, right? That's where I'm at with the game. And at this point, I've been having fun. I think the game is good. I don't think it's the most technologically impressive game, like we've talked about, loading screens. In terms of visuals, I also don't think it's the best looking game ever made, but I do think that the art style is really cool. I particularly enjoy, like I said, I'm a big fan of the spaceships and all that stuff, the way that you do the ship assembly and then you can go inside the ship that you've made. That is really nice. I think that is a really big plus. And the art style of the ships themselves, I think it's fantastic. The characters, they're okay. The animations overall, it's... oh, no. Yeah, the animations are, let's say, passable for the most part, whenever some character doesn't glitch out. I've heard a lot of complaints from people when it comes to, like, facial animations and stuff like that. And I just think that a lot of the comparisons that I've seen are very unreasonable. Like, people will put a random dialogue scene in... a random dialogue scene in Starfield, and they'll put it next to something that happens in Horizon, in a major cutscene in Horizon Forbidden West, and I'm just like, these are just very different. Like, do you understand with how many NPCs you're going to be talking in Starfield? Like, yes, Horizon Forbidden West looks way better. Yeah, of course it does. and I'm a huge fan of Horizon. Like, I think Horizon's a fantastic series as well. But yeah, I just don't think that a lot of the comparisons that have been done on there are to fare, but it's also important to say this is an engine that is showing its age, without a shadow of a doubt. But does it bother me? Do I think that it looks bad? No, that doesn't bother me too much. It bothers me, though, that sometimes characters do glitch out. Like, there's this particular spot in my ship, for whatever reason, where characters will literally just sit in the middle of the air. And the other day I saw one of my favorite and companions basically sink like she was sinking into the depths of hell inside my spaceship. There's like slowly going down until she disappeared. And I was like, why? What happened? So yeah, there's some Bethesda jank in there. If you have a problem with that, then yeah, it's not something that's all that fantastic. But again, art style I think is nice. When it comes to sounds, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I like the soundtrack. I think that the voice acting is pretty good overall. It's nothing like too stellar, but it's pretty good. But the gun sounds, it's weird. Some guns sound fine, and then some guns, they sound like they don't have any weight to them. And they also feel like they don't have any weight to them. And also, why do you need to have 100 different types of ammunition? I'm just curious. Why? But because this is something that also happens in Fallout. It's like, hey, here's 100 different types of ammunition. Why? I don't understand. But that's like another little thing. But yeah, in terms of gameplay, I think the game is pretty fun. I've been having a blast playing it most of the time because, again, it's the setting. The setting is what gets me. As someone who grew up with Star Wars, and my favorite character in Star Wars is Han Solo, I've always wanted to have basically a Han Solo simulator, and this is kind of like as close as it's gotten, because if you go to No Man's Sky, you're not really playing kind of like a human character. You're the anomaly and all of these things, and even though you can engage in certain dialogue with NPCs, it doesn't really feel as fleshed out as something that you get in like a Bethesda game when it comes to dialogue options. No Man's Sky is more about the exploration and flying into space and doing all these crazy things. You don't really get the same level of stories and quest lines that you would get in something like Starfield, right? And then when it comes to, say, for instance, Elite Dangerous, these are my two comparison points when it comes to space games. When it comes to Elite Dangerous, it's like the missions in Elite Dangerous, it's not as interesting. Flying the ship is a million times better. Like I said, Elite Dangerous to me is the gold standard when it comes to flying your ship in space. But the missions themselves, they're not super interested, especially when the developer is more interested in you running around in a stupid dune buggy than on your ship that you probably spent millions of credits customizing. Doesn't make any goddamn sense to me. I don't know what they're doing over there. But at least in here, I get to create my own ship however the hell I want. I get to do a bunch of crazy stuff like the Ryujin questline. I cannot recommend that questline enough if you think that the whole corporate setting is something interesting. I really liked it. I like doing a lot of like the crazy dialogue options and intimidations and persuasions and all of that stuff. I thought that was cool, but you know, to each their own. I'm still enjoying the game. I'm probably going to continue streaming it. These are kind of like my impressions on it at this point. I might do a follow-up video when I eventually finish the game or whatever. But so far, it's a pretty good game. Now, people are going to ask me, Rurikhan, do you recommend it? I mean, at this point, the early access period will be over. In case you were wondering, I don't think the early access period was worth it. Because even though, again, I got it for free because Bethesda sent me a code. But I think that however much it was, it's almost like $100 to $90 or whatever it is. I don't know what the exact pricing on it was. I know that it was expensive. I think that is too much money for what you're getting. As a matter of fact, I think that 60 bones would probably be the fair price here. Obviously, they're going for the 70 bones. It's whatever. Some people like $70. Actually, I don't think most people should like $70 because it's more expensive. I think $60 is the most fair price. But if you're on the fence, then wait for a discount. I think that's the easier thing. If the stuff that we've been talking about in this video, if you're like, oh man, that sounds actually really cool, then yeah, I think it might be worth it to pick it up if you're into it. But again, like I said, this is still very much preliminary. After 45 hours, gameplay impressions, I might do a follow-up when I actually finish the story and jump into New Game Plus. But there's definitely a decent chunk of content here to sink your teeth into. There's a lot of customization when it comes to building your ship. And even the ship flight, I actually like the ship flight. I made a short video talking about it. But the ship combat in the game, one of the things that I like is that a lot of times when it comes to very basic space combat. A lot of people just go like, ship goes forward, and you move your ship and you just shoot things and boom, go. Bethesda actually went a little bit further with it, and they implemented, they have like this switch flight mode thing that you can do, which on PC by default is you press the space bar. And doing that actually allows you to use the momentum of your engines and actually do stuff like it would happen in space, which is, when you push something in space, it just keeps going forever. So you can kind of do that where you do a boost and then you trigger switch flight modes, and you can actually kind of like drift with your ship to turn around, and you'll be going backwards and shooting at the people that are coming towards you from the front, and you can go up and you can go down. And I like that. That type of stuff is a detail that I appreciate. That's the type of stuff that I would do in Elite Dangerous all the time, because when you're engaged in combat, you'll want to like go into I think it was called free flight, but somebody actually told, no, it's flight assist. You toggle flight assist, which is what makes sure that the ship keeps going at whatever direction the engine is sending it to. And basically your ship just gets loose in space at whatever momentum you've given it. And it's really satisfying to pull off crazy shots like that. So that is something that I like a lot. And yeah, anyway, I think I've rambled on for long enough. You guys get the idea of how I feel about the game. Let me know how you feel about Starfield in the comment section down below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe. Peace out.